got our hooking device with the tungsten bead already on it. Now the trick with these jig hooks is there is a slot, and in order for this to go on, you have to kind of rotate it until the slot just pieces right into there. And now we're just going to start our 140 Danville thread, send it down the hook shank, and in order to hold the bead in place, I do this a lot of times. You don't have to do this, but I'll take a thicker thread, which would in this case is just a 210 Danville black, and all that's going to do is make it to where I can lock that bead into place. So I'm creating a dam essentially behind the bead, and then you just tie it off with the 140. So you don't even have to do a whip finish or anything like that. And all that's doing is just making it a little bit quicker to tie this pattern. And once we do that, then we're going to take our 140 to the back of the hook, so it sits right above the barb there. And this is the color that we're going for today. This is a sculpin that I found in a local river. I fish. It just kind of looks like that natural olive sort of hues to it. So I just use natural pine squirrel, where I use like a light olive. And pine squirrel is a little thinner than just a rabbit strip. So you just come out here trying to use a rabbit strip. It's a little too long to give you the profile for these little sculpins that are like 2.5, 3 inches long. But what we're doing is we're going to make the tail. So took out a strip, and you kind of pull those feathers or the fibers forward, and it creates or exposes the skin. So you just chop that off. Then you can kind of see it has a natural flow going from my right hand to my left hand. So that's important how you tie it in, because you want the flow of this thing to be going back. You don't want to tie it in opposite. The other thing with this pattern is, since it is tied on a jig hook, we're going to tie it with the tanned skin going up and the fur going down, because when this pattern is in the water, that's the way it's going to be floating, is the bead head is going to cause this pattern to float hook point up. So you do a couple of loose wraps around the skin, and then I always do a wrap or two around the hook shank, and then I go back over the skin. And what that does is, when you do a couple of wraps around the hook shank can never roll because it's a hook shank, but the skin can. So if you only put it on the skin and then just move off of it, then it'll cause this stuff to roll or even slip out over time. But I found if I do the skin and then come forward onto the hook and go back, then it's fine. Then to get the length of the tail, I always make the tail a little bit longer than the hook. So you just fold it forward, expose some of the skin, cut it. And I always just do one angle. I've seen the looks of doing one angle. I've seen the looks of if you cut it, making kind of like a point at the end. And I kind of like the way that it goes when it's just one angle. It's more like a curly tail jig or that sort of stuff. So now we're going to take a second piece. So this is the piece that dropped off of the when I cut it the first time. We're going to go ahead and tie that in the same area. Roll off it and then roll back on. And then you're going to advance your thread to the bead, or you don't have to. You can just wrap it up. In this instance, it's not going to matter. And all I'm doing right now is just filling in a gap. If you could see it, there was a little, like a valley that had formed because we had put so much thread on the skin, or on the pine squirrel, and then we had put so much thread behind the bead. So it was just kind of this valley that had formed. So now we're just going to go ahead and wrap this up. There is a right way to do this and a wrong way. So you are always kind of tying in the fur so that way it's going back to the tail in this pattern. And also in this pattern, as I'm at the back end of it, I just do less wraps. And then as I continually get closer to the bead, you can see right now like I'm starting to do wraps that are even on top of each other. And that's going to give you a more pronounced head, which gives it that sculpin shape that we're looking for. Because most sculpins, or all sculpins, have this really big fat head, and then a really small, or just kind of a beefy midsection, and then a small tail. So that's what we're looking for. And then as we go to tie this in, if you go forward with it and just wrap it in like that, if you don't have sharp scissors, then you're going to have this little patch of skin that's always there. So you just go ahead and hold the skin straight up, put a loose wrap over it, do 2 or 3 wraps, and then I'll come in with some scissors, and we're just going to chop as tight as you can get it at the base there. And then we're almost done. We're just going to add a hot spot. So the other thing, I just like making this as secure as possible. So just put a bunch of wraps on the thing, enough to where it's not as big as the bead. If your thread wraps are as thick as the bead, then you need to remove some thread wraps. But so it's a little bit thinner, and then we're going to put in the hot spot, which in this instance is just a ice dub. It's UV shrimp pink. You could do UV red. You could do just red. You could do black. I don't really care. The main thing for me is just that you keep in mind this is a hot spot. You don't want this whole fly now to be orange. It's just supposed to be a little tiny spot of some sort of different color or a contrasting color. And with synthetic dubs, sometimes they'll try to come undone on you. So the trick is just keep twisting the thing, just keep twisting, and apply pretty good pressure. And then if it starts coming undone, you can always just wind it a little bit again while you're wrapping it on. Doesn't make you a bad tire. That's what everyone does. So we only have left to whip finish. I'm trying to do 2 whip finishes here. And if you don't know how to whip finish, you need to learn how to do it. It will make your life a lot easier, and it makes the knots a lot more secure than just doing a half hitch or doing 17 half hitches or super glue or whatever. So got a double whip finish here, and the goal is always to have that thread be a little bit smaller than the bead, and that's it. So you've got a Slump Sculpin, which is essentially a slump buster John bar pattern, and the difference with this one is just a little more pine squirrel and a hot spot, and it's tied on a jig hook. Thus the name Slump Sculpin. So looks like a sculpin pattern. Great little guy. Caught a lot of fish on it.